we don't use the internet, only the devil will use the internet.
All right, good evening. This week I'm joined by author Bad Billy Pratt. Billy writes for his website, killtoparty.com, and he's recently published his first book, Welcome to Hell. Billy, thank you for coming on and joining me tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about my work.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I love talking to other creative people, whether or not it's art or writing or visual art or what have you, since I'm a visual artist myself. So I thank you for taking the time and coming on. And I want to start off by saying that I enjoyed Welcome to Hell. I've read most of it before we sat down to talk. And yeah, I find it really fascinating. You know, a lot of these, a lot of the short, you know, clips of your dating life mirror a lot of my own in a lot of ways. So yeah, I felt kind of like a kindred spirit a bit when I was reading this.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm always so glad to hear that. I definitely wanted it to be something that like emotionally resonated with the reader. So yeah, I think a lot of these experiences are very typical and very common. And I think like we've all had variations of kind of the same relationships. So yeah, awesome. Sorry, I kind of lost track of myself, but yeah, no, that's great. I'm really glad that people see different things in the work.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I really did enjoy it. So I hope I hope it is selling well. I see it linked a couple of times. You know, I think we have a lot of similar mutuals on the social media spheres, and I've seen a number of your retweets from people that or retweets of your stuff from people that I follow. So I hope the book is hitting the market well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think that it's all well and good if you write a good book and if you love the book you write, but that's not really enough to move copies of it, unfortunately, in the world we live in. My advice to anyone who's going to release a book is to give it a meme title. And I am totally serious about that. When I named it Welcome to Hell, I think that title is definitely applicable to the content. It's kind of definitely a part of the theme that, you know, we kind of live in this like clownish, bizarro kind of world that, you know, resembles hell, at least compared to what it should be. Mm. And I did kind of, as I was putting it together, come up with a strategy for selling it. And the name had everything to do with that strategy, where I wanted to, I was actually inspired by Bronze Age pervert, Bap.
Yeah.
When he put out his book, the meme was people would link an article where like a gorilla freaks out and beats the crap out of a monkey or a lion or something. And they would write Bap book out how long?
Yes.
Because, you know, Bap's book is all about like finding that, you know, inner core of masculinity and really, you know, embracing it. And I feel like that meme told you everything you needed to know about that book. That meme would sell you the book on the spot. Like you get it. You see the article linked, you know, like cows run away from a farm. It's about freedom. It's about masculinity. You understand what the book's about. So I wanted to take articles that are just so unique to the current year. Articles about, you know, awful, terrible behavior from men or women, relationships that are just shockingly like degenerate. And I wanted to just type simply Welcome to Hell. And it worked out so well. You link the book underneath, and I feel like those tweets are telling you exactly what my book's about. And I feel like they've sold a lot of books on the spot.
That's great. Yeah, I that is exactly what I've seen from you. It's you know, like if I just pop up your Twitter over here, you know, you got this New York Post fictosexual man married hologram bride. Welcome to hell. It's perfect.
I mean, that's the kind of, I guess, using the manosphere term, sexual marketplace.
Mm,
That's the sexual marketplace we have now, where men are, there's such a high percentage of men who are excluded from dating, excluded from relationships, and they're turning to, unprecedented things to kind of fill that void. And I mean, a small minority of people are going to be marrying a fictional character, but you didn't see any of that 50 or 60 years ago.
yeah, definitely. It's definitely a sign of the times, in a terrible way, which is, why a lot of these stories in here really resonated with me, just as my own experience, just trying to be a young man, trying to figure it out, quote unquote, based off of mostly just, being raised on a lot of mass media and pop culture from the 90s. So yeah,
It's funny you say that. I was actually thinking about, as I was kind of prepping for our discussion, I was thinking about what I think Welcome to Hell is, a reoccurring motif is heartbreak. And I think to be brokenhearted, you had to be betrayed in some way. And I think the world has a lot of promise for young people growing up in the kind of, we're around the same age. So the era we grew up in, our generation, I think was promised a kind of endless party lifestyle, like a kind of budget rock star type existence. And I think that we kind of, looked at college as this like huge party for 4 years, and like it kind of gets extended out throughout the rest of your 20s. And I am pretty sure my conception as a young adolescent of a person's 30s, where you're still, in my mind, you're still single, you're still holding on to this car, for lack of a better term, a college dormitory kind of existence, was Seinfeld. I really, really believed that adult life in a person's 30s, or at least early 30s, would resemble Seinfeld in a totally, one-to-one realistic way,
yeah,
where you're in an apartment building with all of your friends, kind of extending that college dormitory lifestyle where you're popping in and out of each other's apartments. There kind of are no boundaries in that way, where you're dating just different beautiful women almost on a week-to-week basis, where your life is just one zany, fun adventure. And marriage and family, that's going to happen. And it just happens on its own, but it happens whenever you want it, and it could happen later on. But you could kind of extend this ridiculous, zany, fun single life for as long as the eye could see. And it's when you get there, if you do end up achieving it, it's never going to look exactly like that. I think the beautiful women are a little more few and far between. And that's if you even get to the point where you're attracting, women. And not everyone gets there, but that's the manosphere is going to tell you that you need to grind for years and do all of this ridiculous stuff to attract women, which even that 50 or 60 years ago would be ridiculous.
yeah,
But it's almost like you're in training to be this successful single man, even though that's taking years out of your life. It's taking years out of your life. And and it's like you have this idea that marriage is always going to be an option. There's always going to be a good girl at the end of the rainbow that you're going to kind of trade it all in for. And that doesn't just happen. And as we move forward in this hell world that we're all kind of tied to, it just seems less and less likely, and your odds are worsening the older you get. So there's just a lot. I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I mean, I think that just my real life realizing of that, as I think I started writing when I was 34, 35. I finished the book when I was about 40, and you're taking my journey of that very hard realization.
Yeah, man, I can really relate, because when I was growing up, I I thought sort of the same thing, like I was going to get out there, going to do my life. My parents were married, their parents were married, like it
Yep.
went all the way back up. So I took for granted this idea that, well, I would just stumble into a good relationship and marry the girl and have the family. Like I never really thought about it consciously. Like it was never something that, like you said, I took it for granted that that's what was gonna happen. Like, oh, maybe I date a couple girls here and there, and then one of them would just be the one or something, and you would just click and you get hitched and you'd have a bunch of kids, and that would be it.
And like I think it's like an important sticking point for me was that happens when you choose for, not even just that like you're entitled to that and it just happens. That happens whenever you want to pull the plug on all the fun you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not something you're working toward or you're earning. It's just like, oh, whenever I want to, tap out of my single life, the wife is somehow right there and we're just going to go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those things when you're a kid, you're like, well, of course everyone ends up having a family. Everyone ends up having kids at some point, it just was one of those things that, like you said, you take for granted.
Yeah, definitely. And something you mentioned there that was really interesting was like the manosphere will tell you, you need to grind, you need to build yourself up into being this sort of idealized version of yourself, which I think in some ways is good advice because, you do have to make something of yourself in this world. No one's going to make you into something really, but the focus on becoming like the ultimate bachelor, that I think is unhealthy. I don't really think that that's really a great mindset. And I think it kind of plays into this idea where, you can just date a whole bunch of women with no real issue and then choose that good one and get into a family. But I don't think that that's very accurate to reality.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we really kind of look at it now with a little distance, I know our generation was more or less encouraged to not marry young. I think one of the big boomer regrets is that like post high school kind of 18 to 22 time span where everyone seemed to get married. I think boomers, unfortunately, were kind of paused by the progressive world that they helped usher in.
Yeah.
And I think that they kind of look back and say, well, I missed out on all of that, all of that super fun, in your 20s, exploring the world, tons of hookups kind of thing. So I think they even took for granted their longevity in relationships, even if they didn't end up divorced. I think a lot of them still ended up regretting not having those years to travel and and what have you. So yeah, I just think that it's been a mess for a long time. So they kind of encouraged our generation to not avoid what they called a mistake, avoid the trap of marrying young. And I think now you could see that the all of the rampant promiscuity, it doesn't just it's not like a temporary thing. I think it does wear on both men and women, having multiple partners. And, I think you'd be much better off with that single partner that you met at 22 and you kind of progressively work on the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I've had this same conversation with a couple of other people, the same idea that, the boomer generation, they themselves, as well as the media and the pop culture that was generated through that generation aimed at us, in being their children, definitely helped shape the attitudes going into my 20s and 30s that we're always like, oh, don't curse me with married, don't tell me I'm getting married, the old ball and chain. There was all these euphemisms and comedy about it. But when I look back on my life and I look at at least my parents' life and my grandparents' life, we we may have traded, we certainly have traded something that was very good for something that ultimately I find to be empty, and the source of a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our society these days is like people in their 30s who have maybe a career of some kind, but no family, no children, no meaning in their life outside of like what they do for a living. Especially the women, you said earlier to the encouragement not to get married. I think that was really, really aimed at young women.
Definitely.
And yeah. And, you got these women who are hitting like the magic number 30, 31, 32, who realize like they don't like sending emails all day, or they are depressed or anxious for some reason, or have pets. And it's all these different ways of coping with the fact that they really should have had kids, 10 years ago. And they should have been with a guy that they respected and loved and invested in a marriage to build a real family. And then, if you're 30 or something, 32, 33-year-old woman, your oldest is turning 10, maybe,
Right.
they're becoming a little human, right? Like
Totally.
you're forming people, like you're forming the next generation of people. And this was never really even conveyed to myself, or really anybody that I know of who could have said it actively, that I've spoken with who are around my age.
Yeah, one realization I've had over the past several years of kind of thinking about this was how much of the modern world is shaped for older women having regrets, if you could believe it, about not having the experiences they wanted their daughters to have. Today, even I put on Twitter that the meme of safe sex, the meme term safe sex, has really more to do with young women going to college and less to do with the spread of STDs. I don't think STDs are such a concern for your average heterosexual. I do think that older women are very, very concerned with young women not having children too early, as they see it, not going to college. And these are all, unfortunately, the regrets of the older generation who maybe felt that they themselves were kind of memed into getting married young again, like having children young, and what, as they see it, giving their life away, which is, unfortunate. But I mean, they were like, these people we're all tampered by, social programming, of course. And I think they are, seeing the social programming of what life could have been like if you put it off 10 years, if you started having the children in your mid-30s, and you could have had those experiences of traveling, and you could have went to, university, you could have had a meaningful career. And unfortunately, modernity has made all of these things seem very romantic, and a lot more romantic than, I guess not doing it, chasing toddlers at 19. But I think so much of our social programming now is to kind of push young women toward the universities, and make having children at a young age. There's the show Teen Mom that kind of like craps on younger mothers.
Yeah.
I just think when you really dissect things, like so much of the stuff we hear and see really does have to do with young women kind of not committing to relationships too early.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that traveling. I know my buddy Lamprey Milt always says, you got to go to Santorini and get your photo, your Instagram photos, and you're traveling. And, Lamprey's a great dude. I've had him on the show a couple of times. I think he'd be a good guy for you to talk to as well. Because we talk about these same kind of issues, like women who are sort of groomed into living that fantasy life, and from their older generations fear of missing out, I suppose. Oh, well, I didn't get to go to college, and I didn't get to travel, and all of these things. And it seems like a complete, just it seems just like there is a misalignment in what is really important nowadays, because we are so, or were so wealthy, so advanced, quote unquote, like we had so few real issues, especially like in the 80s and 90s. Those were some really good times. And to be an American,
Right.
I think people really took for granted just how good it really was. And yeah, this idea that, oh yeah, girl power, she can do it. We're dealing with, by then, I guess, second wave feminism, or maybe third wave. Who even knows what the waves are? But yeah, these ideas that, you don't need no man, you can do anything a man can do. Go to college, have a career. Children are a burden, like you mentioned. This
Yeah.
idea that having a family and having children who are like little copies of yourself are somehow demeaning or beneath you. Except that's how we all got here. So I don't really know where these ideas, how these ideas percolate in these people's minds, but it does seem to be, it was very effective.
I think it's the idea that women could have it all. And I do think that came from second wave feminism. I think second wave feminism was the divorce era, where the patriarchy is what was evil, and that women should, the great sin was doing it all too early, and you could have it all by kind of front loading your 20s with the travel and the career, and then kind of ease into the middle of your 30s when you start having the kids. Of course, fertility doesn't necessarily always agree with that plan. I think second wave feminism, I think what happened was that once it turned on having, sex with the Chads, I think that's when second wave became third wave, and third wave became, hookup culture. It's okay to bang the asshole for 10 years, or the variety of assholes, and then find your, in, again, manosphere terms, beta male to kind of settle down with once you quote unquote get that out of your system. But of course, I think it's more of an addiction than I think it's more of an addiction more than like sowing your wild oats. I don't think it's something you get out of your system. I think once you kind of get on that train of chasing the, the most attractive people, it's much harder to walk away from.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I do think so, because I see a lot of manosphere content, this idea that women who when a woman gets a really high value man from her perspective, it's hard for her to see that as anything other than like, this is what I deserve. Like I can get this type of a guy, even if the dude was just using it as a slump buster or what have you, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that
that's your big problem with promiscuity, is that it does, no woman is going to say, well, this guy just wanted, like you said, a slump buster, or just wanted easy sex, and I presented to be very effortless. No one's going to say that. Everyone is always going to look at it like, well, I'm just as hot as him, or he must think I'm really hot if he's going to want that from me. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case. And I think as we move forward with Tinder, and how Tinder is more or less like a sex menu for, high value men, that that gap between the kind of guy who would, really settle down with the woman, and the kind of guy who would, settle down with the woman for a single night, is going to be so wide that it's going to be very, very hard for a woman to have respect for the man who does want a relationship with her.
Yeah, that's true. Because you're definitely aiming at two completely different things in that regard. Because if you're just following your passions and you're just doing whatever, you're not really looking for that long-term commitment. And I think women don't realize how different men and women's sexuality and their plans really are. They don't really, they have a hard time putting themselves in our shoes. I think men probably have a little bit of a better time putting themselves in women's shoes because we're more analytical, and we can kind of understand sexual dynamics and these sorts of things. But I don't think it works the other way around. You know, I've tried to sort of, in my experience, explain these sorts of things to a lot of girls, little bits here and there, you know, just to explain how men look at relationships. And they always kind of look at me with like glassy eyes, like they don't really seem like they understand exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the realizations I think people or men who are coming through the manosphere come to. There was a point where very early on where I had found manosphere internet forums, and it was like, where has this been all my life?
Mm-hmm.
I think like a lot of men, half of the stuff if you're willing to entertain the manosphere, you have figured out probably 75% of it already. And it's the last 25% that kind of like really fills in the rest of the puzzle. And I remember when I started reading manosphere content, and I'm like, well, I understand like how this works now. I understand the way reality is. There's no more holes in the picture, whatever. I was very into like talking to everyone I would talk to about this stuff. I remember telling women like, I don't think you're able to access the same like degree of reality that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And they would just tell me to go, you know, F myself. I don't know if I can curse on your show. So
yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Great.
Say whatever you like. But yeah.
Yeah. So these women would be like, "Oh, fuck yourself!" Like you're telling me, like I don't understand reality, and like I mean, there's of course, if that is the case, there's no way to explain. It's like trying to explain to a child that you know about the adult world. I don't think it's that women aren't capable. I think it's that they just so have evolved to a point where they don't need to. It doesn't benefit them at all to kind of understand these things. And I think maybe we're kind of entering a hellish world where it would benefit them to understand that the sexy guy is just with them because they're easy, rather than because they're so hot they could attract men like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that sucks. Would you want to think that? Because I wouldn't want to think that either. You know?
That's a good point. Yeah. But yeah, it's unfortunate because this is all stuff that you would hope that they would have been taught earlier in their life, you know, by their father, right? Like, or their mother. Maybe mom would have a better chance of talking to their daughter about these sorts of realities. But it just doesn't seem like anybody really did the birds and the bees talk outside of like, you know, the immediate physical activity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that because like we talk about sexual education for teenagers so much in the culture, and now that's, you know, extended well beyond the pale of, you know, that's of anything, right? Of anything, it's crazy. But you're right that relationship dynamics are never broached even a little bit. I don't know if it's because that's really the taboo subject. Maybe that would hurt people's feelings, or is it that most people themselves wouldn't understand it to begin with? And I think it's probably a little of that too. I don't know. I think that we've for so long have stressed the importance of maximizing women's freedom, that there never was a point where anyone asked, is this really what's good for both men and women? I mean, really just women, let's be real. Like no one gives a shit about men.
That's true.
But no one's ever stopped to even say, is this the best thing for women?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think that kind of goes back to you know, more of a religious outlook on the world as opposed to a secular modern outlook. You know, I think that these ideas of progress and shifting worldviews right around, you know, the boomer generation, even though most people in America, I think, would still consider themselves Christian at the time, you know, it had already been, it had sort of been bullied, I suppose, maybe, into changing these values, and kind of like eschewing older, more antiquated ideas of family structure and sexual relations, where you know, we can see how people moved into these new ideas for women, as opposed to the older patriarchal understandings of things. And I guess that all probably happened with the sexual revolution, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Man, I think, I mean, I think the real culprit has to be the invention of birth control. I
Mhm.
mean, before birth control, you could have you could want to have a sexual revolution all you want. And there's just going to be either an abundance of babies or an abundance of abortion. And, you know, probably a mix of the two, which is, you know, horrible. I think that before the pill, these ideas could, you know, I think only for the most extreme women are going to be prostitutes or very promiscuous. But I mean, the pill kind of like flipped the world on its head, I mean, overnight, where
Yeah.
sex suddenly, if it doesn't have that very, you know, very tangible consequence, it can seem theoretically, you know, free of consequence.
Yes, that's a really good point. Yeah. Birth control really does open up, you know, like you were saying earlier in the show, you know, this idea that girls can go to, you know, go to college and all of this stuff. Like, if you don't have to worry about the accidentally having a child, and you know, world's your oyster. All right, technical difficulties aside, we're back. Yeah, so we were talking about birth control, and also your comment earlier on how safe sex was just sort of code for getting women into college.
You know, I really do think so. I mean, I just, you know, what sparked that was I saw someone on the street today with a sweatshirt that says like safe sex rocks. And it just got me kind of thinking about, why is that a meme? Why is that something people talk about? And it's gotta be like, you know, get your daughters on birth control, but we can't rely on that. You know, they do have to take a pill every day. What if they forget? So like, get the kids in condoms. You know, it's gotta be that. I'm so convinced.
Mhm. Yeah, there was quite a focus on the idea of safe sex, if I remember correctly, even in like junior high, high school when I was a kid. Like,
Yes.
that was a big deal. Yeah.
I just doubt. I mean, the incident of STDs, I think I mean, look, if you're hyper promiscuous, you're going to run into some bad stuff.
Mhm.
But I think for the average person who has their little girlfriend who they hang out with on a Saturday night, I mean, come on. Like, what are the incidents of STDs at you know, that kind of normal rate of sexual activity? It's got to be very low.
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing here? We're talking about preventing pregnancy because, I mean, look, unexpected pregnancy was kind of a blessing because that
Yeah.
kind of puts your life um in a you know, in the right direction. So I think there are some people who, myself included, I probably would have been married if I impregnated, you know, the first girlfriend that I was, you know, sexually active with. And I mean, it's really tough to say what would have been better. Again, I think the world we live in makes any arrangement difficult at this point. I think that, and you know, I don't blame those boomers who are so unhappily married, because look, the world we're living in is encouraging you to not be happily married, right?
Right.
Um, and I think, and I, you know, the conspiracy part of me thinks it's deliberate, but
Mhm.
in the very least, that's the direction the world has kind of moved in. And would it have been better if I married at 20? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it's really impossible to say. Um, but yeah, I think kind of the unexpected pregnancy was God's way of saying, like, here's, you know, here's a way for you to get your life in order at a very early age.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Now would I have been better off if I had had a child at 20, 21? Well, with the state of the world, just due to all of the other circumstances, I don't know. I think that's pretty young for me, but it certainly would have forced me to align myself in a direct route. Once you have people relying on you, you have a woman and a child, you really, if you're responsible, and you want what's best for others, you really can't be screwing around and making the mistakes that I was very easily able to throughout my 20s, because I really didn't have anyone relying on me. I was my own person. I was living that, bachelor young man lifestyle, trying to get my career together, date a lot of girls, find myself in, as lame as that might sound, but that's really what I was doing. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that it is the best. I don't think it's really that great. And like you said, I think children are a blessing from God. And also an oopsie daisy pregnancy. Well, you've decided, he decided for us. He decided what we're supposed to be doing, because it's natural to have children. Like when you detach the reproductive part from the sex act, when you take that out of the equation, it just becomes kind of like a hedonistic treadmill. You're just having sex purely for the pleasure of it. But we don't even really know the internal world of people whose bodies expect them to have children. Like I for a while, a theory of mine has been, for many of these women who are on birth control and these sorts of things, like one of the reasons why, besides of course the hormones, that their moods rise and fall and go into these cycles, is because their body naturally is expecting to get pregnant, and like your body is doing things that you're not conscious of. I think
Right.
it's just natural for us to have these things happen. And I think that could be a cause of a lot of the anxiety and depression that then we find other ways to medicate these days.
I mean, it is kind of a crazy thing that they put out this pill, and it's safe in the sense that it's not going to kill you. But like you said, there's a lot of space between something being safe and something killing you, that I'm sure no one really ever thought of, as far as affecting, a woman's mental state. They say that, I don't know if this statistic is accurate. I was on a funny story. I was on a podcast once. I was on Break the Rules, and there was this New York Times guy, and he was like yelling and nitpicking over every single thing I said. So, but a soft statistic I've heard is that 1 in 4 women are on SSRIs past a certain age.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's like something like that. I mean, in the very least, they're more popular than ever. And how much does years of birth control contribute to that, or contribute to bipolar disorder, where you're having, very, very wild mood swings? I don't know, but I mean, could studies have ever been done? Were studies ever done on that? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, I imagine how could you have a 20-year study on something like that when it was just really it was really released to fanfare,
Sure.
at the time. And I'm sure it was just as political as certain other medical achievements that we may or may not be seeing in the modern times. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time though, like a major theme of my book is I didn't want it to be just shitting on the modern woman. I think that's too easy. I think that's boring. You can go on any manosphere message board and engage in that and find that, and it's just done to death. I wanted to look at all of these problems and see, like, how many of them can I find inside myself?
Yeah.
I mean, if I was around in, I don't know when the pill was released, sometime in the 60s, would I have been super excited for it? Would I have, thought it was the greatest thing ever, and suddenly I could do all of this stuff consequence free? Yeah, probably. If I was a modern woman, if the tables were turned and I was getting Tinder matches from all of these super hot girls who, maybe weren't interested in having a future with me, but wanted to hang out for a little bit, I mean, that would be great. Okay. So we could only blame women taking the bait for what they have now so much. The bait shouldn't be given is the issue.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I never got any, I didn't get that from your stories. I didn't get that you were sort of like teasing or poking fun at women. In fact, some of them are actually like very empathetic, sympathetic. Like there was a story about a woman who never left a small beach house after her husband had passed away. Like she'd found him dead, and I mean that hit me. That was a tough little read, and it was a very short chapter. And
you're the only person I've talked to about the book. I mentioned her a few times over the course of the book. You're the only person who has ever mentioned her. She's like the one reoccurring character. I had about 9 months we were together in 2019, and she had broken up with me, and that was like, I feel like that was just like the kind of emotional center of the book that's reoccurring is all. Yeah, she that's a case, right?
it's brutal.
She was married to a guy, and he overdosed on heroin. And she's still, I mean, she deals with that to this day, of course. I wonder though, if I hate to say this, I hate to use her as like she's a real person, I hate to use her as like an example, but if they had children earlier, would all of that played out the same way? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is hard to say, and I'm with you too on like not teasing or making fun of women for taking what is pretty obvious, like from their shoes, at least all the propaganda around it, certainly, a key to a life that they never would have been able to have up until that point. Like I see the draw, absolutely. But like you said, that bait should never have been given to them, because, women are ultimately going to be looking to us for guidance. They're going to be looking to men, their husbands or their father, as their barometer for what's right and wrong. And it's our duty as men, and ultimately, these were government and all sorts of other people who are involved here. They're supposed to be looking out for us and helping to do what's right and moral. But we've seen how often that kind of lines up when it comes to governments and social engineering and all of that. So, it was, and we didn't have the internet then. So it was basically whatever's on the TV is the truth.
Right.
I imagine you'd have to be pretty out there at the time to be, going along a different path, unless you were like extremely religious in a religious community or something, and you had that around you, you probably wouldn't have been insulated from any of these changes. Like it was probably just a regular thing for most people.
I mean, definitely. I think as the country was pushed in a more secular direction, I think you have this combination of, capitalism and democracy, and together, like it's just, add in the internet and you have an explosive situation. Democracy makes it a kind of populist game where you want to tell people what they want to hear. I assume you're familiar with Moldbug, or should I not assume?
No, I am. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, Moldbug lays it out pretty cleanly that, democracy is this like 4-year cycle where you have to kind of reclaim power every 4 years. Like, what can you build in the long term?
Yes.
Certainly not something that people maybe can appreciate, let's say. I mean, things that people don't like, but that are necessary for the maintenance of a civilization. You can't really do any of that. It just has to be, you're pleasing people in the moment, and you're kind of reclaiming your power every 4 years. And it doesn't work. And when you add in, capitalism with, maybe capitalism was a little better 100 years ago, but now we have this like insane kind of just money grab, marketing that's like, appealing to people's most, basest interests. And I mean, all of that together, and you just have this world where people are just used as tools to kind of, have people, keep power, get money, and we're all kind of like stuck with these like broken lives.
Yeah, that's really well said. And it's only been kind of accelerating, maybe maybe before the end of World War II, things weren't so, there weren't as many issues, or it wasn't so cynical, or the leadership and the parties that are supposed to represent us weren't so obviously corrupt and wicked. But now, at the time that we're at, the modern day, I think it's pretty obvious that everything is just about instant gratification, turning people into basically faceless numbers. We're just cogs in the machine at this point, and most people who are brought into this country, it seems that it's just about who's going to vote for who. It's not really about doing anything that's going to make your life better in any real substantial way. It's not going to create strong families, health. Health has been given over to pharmaceutical companies. Like, you just don't worry about being depressed. Just take this pill. Like, don't question why you're depressed and what you can actually do to fix it and make yourself better and make the people around you better. Just take this pill. Just take this thing. Watch this show all night. Like, it's a wild place to be. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, man. Well, we kind of really went on a roll there. So I didn't want to interrupt, but how did you wind up coming to write this book? Were you blogging on Kill to Party before you decided to put it all on paper?
Yeah. So I've been blogging on Kill to Party for 7 years now. Wow, it just actually, I wasn't paying attention. It just had its 7th year anniversary, I think, in the beginning of April.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I wanted to, I have multiple influences. Do you know who Chuck Klosterman is?
You mentioned him on another podcast, but no, I'm not familiar with him.
Chuck Klosterman is great. He's a pop culture essayist. Definitely total normie, which is fine. We don't need this, this kind of like counterculture narrative in everything we read. But he does really, really good pop culture essays. He actually put out a book recently that's entirely on the decade of the 90s, like literally start to finish, that I highly recommend. But I had read an article on, I'd read one of his essays on comparing Kurt Cobain to David Koresh. And I thought it was so cool at the time that it kind of, I have a degree in literature and philosophy. I really, really liked doing my literature papers, like lit analysis in college. I just thought it was a lot of fun. That's kind of boring to do. I mean, no one's going to really want to read a blog like that. But I figured like something like pop culture, you could get more interest in. So his essay on comparing Kurt Cobain to David Koresh kind of gave me some ideas on writing about Green Day, on writing about Kurt Cobain myself. I was coming up with all this stuff, but I didn't really have a place to put it. So it's kind of one of those, at the time I was thinking someday, whatever, and those things mostly never happen. Then I found the manosphere. Mm-hmm. And again, like I really fell in love with it because suddenly it's like, you know, people don't really talk like that. And when you're having these thoughts and no one, you think you're crazy, or you think you're maybe some kind of prophet from another world when you're like seeing things that other people aren't. And the manosphere was finally a community where it's like, no, 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 we see that too. We're
Yeah.
totally with you. Like,
May I ask, was it a trauma that brought you to the manosphere? Did you have a traumatic experience that got you into
I
the red
did,
pill
but
world?
I did, but it wasn't exactly that.
Okay.
I didn't, I guess, you know what? Maybe I didn't. I mean, like I had a shitty relationship. It was
Mhm.
4.5 years. It was like nearly killing me. But getting out of it was like, man, I was like on a high, like a jailbreak. Like
Okay.
I was like, I seriously rode like a high for like 6 months after, because I really got to a point where I was like, and it's crazy because I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. There was no reason for me to think like, well, this is the rest of my life. But I was like, well, I guess this is it. Like and I have this shitty, wreck of a relationship. This girl I'm fighting with constantly, but it's like, well, this is my life, I guess. What's that line from Star Wars? Like, I guess this is our lot in life. Um, and it's just unbelievable that I was thinking that way. But I got out of it. I'm on this high where I'm just like, wow, I could talk to other girls and they want to hang out with me. Like, holy shit. And I one of these girls that I was talking to told me about Reddit. So I'm like, all right, I'll check this out. And I didn't really know how to use it. So I kind of clicked this menu that I don't even know if it exists anymore, that just kind of in alphabetical order lists the subreddits, which is kind of hard to imagine because if you've used Reddit, there's like an infinite number of them, but I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'm clicking through this list and I see something called the red pill. So I'm like, what's that? So it's a forum, a manosphere forum essentially, but that wasn't in the description. It was just like a forum for men to discuss their issues.
Yeah.
And I remember my gut reaction was like, that's so ridiculous. Like, what do men have to discuss? Men don't have issues. And yeah, because we're so indoctrinated to this like concept of, this false concept of privilege, and I'm sure I at the time was a normie, and I would have told you that was the case,
Yeah.
even though I never experienced it myself, but okay. Yeah, so I mean, I eventually looked at it and it just, I mean, I'm sure I spent at that point just weeks straight reading posts. So I'm into the manosphere, I'm into pop culture analysis, and I kind of combine them just to make posts on the red pill because I was super into it. So I'm, looking at the first episode of The Simpsons from like a red pill manosphere like lens. The Simpsons are funny because like Homer, we all know Homer as like the idiot dad. That's like that trope where he's like we make fun of dad's stupid, mom's smart. Mm-hmm. It didn't start that way. The first season of The Simpsons, Homer's the lead character, and you're supposed to sympathize with Homer because of the loss of respect for fatherhood. And I mean, they just kind of forget about that as the series moves forward entirely.
Yeah.
But I found that really interesting. So I posted it. I think Heartiste really liked it. It got a lot of traction. And I'm like, hey, I could start a blog where I just look at movies and TV shows from this perspective and see what I find.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that Kilt's a Party caught on very quickly. I think it's the hardest thing in the world must be blogging stuff out to 10 people or 20 people or whatever it is, and God bless those people, because I don't know if I would have had the the grit to really stick that out. But it caught on very quickly. Heartiste would post it on Twitter, and when he did, it was crazy. Heartiste had, you know who Heartiste is, I assume.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Heartiste had incredible traction at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he would post one tweet, one link. I would get 5,000 views by the end of the night. Like
Wow.
a crazy amount of traction. Yeah. So, I mean, I was, I'm at least up at a first step. Like I was, kind of known overnight. I wasn't just blogging out to the abyss that never would have lasted. So I really consider myself very, very lucky for that. And it just kind of, I'm a big believer in not having a brand, not doing content. I think that sucks. I want to take people on my intellectual journey in real time. And I think the best Twitter accounts, the best writers aren't confined to, oh, well, I'm the blank guy. I need to write about girls. I need to write about dating. I don't want to be that guy. I want to kind of take you where I'm going, and hopefully you like me enough to go for that ride. So as I went forward, I kind of expanded past the manosphere. I mean, obviously that stuff always is going to influence what I'm writing. I think it's interesting, but I went in the direction of kind of looking at Moldbug and stuff like that, like neo-reactionary kind of stuff, democracy, right? These big ideas that I was incorporating into the blog. So I think it kind of ended up this conglomerate of pop culture, women, dating, and like a little bit of kind of dark enlightenment type elements, and kind of just came together as Welcome to Hell.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's an awesome introduction. Like, I find it so fascinating that you just popped open Reddit and found the red, and you were just kind of scrolling and it popped up there. Like, that's wild.
And it's a funny thing too, because I'm pretty sure that I don't think it would ever, it's so like quarantined and just put in the corner, and you have to know about it like a secret club at this point. So it is kind of funny that it just was right there. I mean, just total. I mean, this really, if you want to look at that as the genesis of all this, it was by total chance.
That's awesome. And it's great to be able to resonate with someone with a lot of followers, like getting Heartiste size on it at the time. That's
totally.
That's awesome, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Of course, Delicious Tacos was a big influence on my writing. What I love about tacos is, and I'm assuming a lot. I assume you're familiar.
So it's actually, I thought initially that you were involved with him in some way, because the cover of your book looked very similar to his book.
Yes.
And then I noticed in a couple of chapters you mentioned him, like you mentioned this. I think you had a back and forth with some guy on Twitter DMs, like, Tacos wasn't responding to me. I'm going to ask Billy, and then maybe he'll actually respond to, like, Tacos will respond to him next week or something. So yeah, I'm familiar with Delicious Tacos, but I haven't really read much of his stuff.
His stuff is great. He's another guy where he's not going to feel confined to a brand. He just really writes whatever he feels like. And he's I feel like he's even moving away from dating now. I think that's his vibe shift, as he calls it.
Mm.
He talks about birds a lot. I mean, like, he's just going where he wants to go. But his writing influenced me quite a lot. I mean, he's very, very raw. He's very, very honest. And I kind of looked at myself and I'm like, I feel like a lot of writers are trying to portray an image, especially coming from the manosphere. You want to have an image, you want to seem cool, you want to,
right. Listen to all my conquests. I can tell you how to do it, kid. Yeah.
Exactly. So I wanted to kind of strip away any pretensions. I didn't want any posturing. I wanted it to just be raw and honest in the way it was.
Yeah, I think that you succeeded in that, because I've reading this book, it's not like a bunch of conquests. It's a bunch of like uncomfortable, in a lot of ways, uncomfortable, awkward, honest. Like, I knew when I screwed up, because you are, I'm sure a lot of these, you had known female nature, quote unquote, or you had been reading red pill stuff. So, you're going through the date and then you're like over analyzing yourself, and you're like, you knew when you screwed up at that time, or maybe looking back on it, you're like, okay, that's where I messed up, because I know, X, Y, and Z, because I was reading Heartiste or what have you. Like, I can totally relate, because I have been through that exact same experience. So reading this book was like really interesting. It was, it was like another guy. It read like my own thoughts about my own bad dates, or my good dates, or my bad relationships, or my good relationships, from like someone who's over analyzing it a little too much, which I totally do.
It only, it's funny because like the red pill manosphere is going to kind of the premise is that you're going to get better with women, and I don't think it happens. I think you end up getting. I was fine before then. I mean, like maybe there were some mistakes I had along the way. I think a lot of I think one major thing that comes up a lot with men who find the manosphere is their understanding of love is not exactly what it really is. And you know, that the kind of manosphere saying where men love romantically, women love value. Women want, you know, men are more sympathetic in their love. Men don't lose love for a woman for her faults, or if she starts to have trouble in life. I think men kind of have their masculinity reaffirmed by, you know, being solid for a woman. Whereas the manosphere idea is that if a man starts to struggle, she kind of loses her feelings or begins to lose her feelings, especially maybe over the long haul. Whether that's true or not for everyone, or whether it's true enough, you know, to be, happens often enough to be true, I don't know. But I think that resonates with a lot of guys. And I think that when you look back at your failed courtships or your failed relationships, you can kind of see how maybe that was the case where you got too comfortable, or you weren't the same guy at the beginning of the relationship, maybe 2 years in, or something like that, where you could kind of pinpoint where you went wrong. I think that how applicable that knowledge is to future relationships, I don't really know. But again, the other promise of the manosphere is that you're going to get better with women up front. And I don't think a lot of guys really necessarily needed that. I talked to women just fine before, and I definitely went through a period after where I fumbled a lot of interactions because I was too in my head with like, oh, is what I'm saying what I should be saying, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think, I think I've talked to a lot of guys who said their game was better before the manosphere.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even say where I was at beforehand, because I was able to stumble into girlfriends, but never ones that clicked, you know, never ones that lasted.
Right.
But it was actually the kind of like destruction of a long-term relationship that's what got me to find the manosphere. And I was able to sort of like look back on the 2 years of that mess and, you know, psychoanalyze it. After I'd read, devoured a bunch of that red pill stuff and human psychology and whatnot. And then I definitely went through the experience of like being too in my head, because now I had all this extra knowledge that I didn't have beforehand, and it was coloring a lot of my interactions. But I will say, I do think that it is valuable in a lot of ways, because the idea of love, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I agree with you that understanding that men and women love differently is very important, but also something about being a man and showing love is you need to, how do I say this correctly? Understanding that you need to detach the fact that you love someone from just being on an emotional roller coaster. Like, I think that's something that's really important for young men to understand, that like you need to love, but not allow it to like take you over. You know, you need to be able to control your emotions. And I know some red pill guys and manosphere guys are good at much better at discussing this than I am, but you know, it's something that I find falls in line a lot with Christianity and the idea of love in Christianity, which is one of the things that pushed me in that direction, is that love is not necessarily some goofy feeling. Like love is not, love is love, like we see on major, all of this propaganda and stuff that we've seen in the culture. Like love is not just some feeling. It is doing what's right too. It's like doing what's ordered and right, and telling someone what's good for them oftentimes when it would be emotionally, bad, sometimes what the loving thing to do is to be kind of hard and cold, and knowing when these things happen are really important. Whereas for women, I don't think that exists at all. Like, I don't think that women think about it like that at all. I think women are emotionally attached to men, for the reasons you mentioned, but they can't understand that, maybe they can intellectually, but not experientially. They can't understand that oftentimes, like, I can love you, but also still think that we're not good together, or I can love you and still be sort of like tough and have boundaries, because I don't think that they have the same process.
No, I don't think they have the same process either. I think that their feelings are more, fleeting than a man's feelings for a woman. And I think we had, rules about marriage being forever. And the whole point of marriage is to, in thinking about it as a forever contract, now you're stuck. Your task is to make it work. Your task isn't to decide if you're happy or not, and then make a decision based on that. It's almost like taking your happiness out of the equation probably guarantees you more happiness in the long run than this like kind of temperature gauge where it's like, well, our happiness is run out and we're going to, proceed with a divorce. A forever contract means that you need to, keep working on it. And I think that, people needed that. I think that, it's kind of like the paradox of choice, where you go to the store and suddenly there's 50 pairs of jeans, which, would seem ideal, but now you can't pick one because there are too many. Giving people that choice to constantly be able to give up is kind of overwhelming. You're kind of constantly looking at the grass being greener. And again, it's like the problem the boomers have. I don't really blame them as much as kind of think of them as victims, especially on an individual basis, where the world suddenly became very against their own long-term happiness. Where it's like, once you have to start thinking about the grass being greener as an option, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to think, well, I could say, I wish I married my high school girlfriend. I guarantee you if I did, at least a little bit, at least maybe every night when I'm in bed, I'm going to be thinking about, I wish I fucked more. There's the world is against us. There's no good way to do it. And some people do pull it off even despite that. So I'm not even going to say that everyone's fucked. It's not really the case, but it's just very, very hard. We need those rules. We need to kind of be reined in. We can't have so much choice.
I think that's very well said. Something that drew me to Orthodoxy was how they describe marriage as like dying, sort of like sacrificing yourself for the other, whereas you're expected to sacrifice yourself for your wife is expected to sacrifice herself for you, and it's before God as a sacrament forever, because you're going to have to work together and you're going to have to try to live good lives together, both parties playing their part, but ultimately to aim it at the same value, to aim it at the same agreed good, so that you could create the best possible outcome, because you're deciding to do it as a promise to one another and to God forever, because then you're going to be having children, you're going to be bringing families together, these ideas that I don't even think people consider anymore. Like, it's not just two people coming together, but it's two families oftentimes mixing together, and then you're going to have cousins and aunts and uncles and different people, different customs, from one side of the aisle to the other, and all of this stuff. I think that, you're right. We do have too many options. And then we have a culture that sort of like fills our head with the idea that the grass could be greener. Like, no matter what you do, whatever choice you make, there will be plenty of inputs coming into your reality that help to sort of like, needle at those. Well, what if I had done this instead of that, or what if I'd made this decision? Like all of these things kind of like assault us and really
Yes.
damage the idea that we should really just have, find someone you love and respect, and who has the same values that you do, and get together and make it work. Because we only get one shot at this, really.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. If you think about when we were kids, or I mean, I assume we're around the same age. Maybe not. You seem like a handsome young man. I don't know if everyone could see you, but
No, they can't. I'm going to be 38 this summer.
okay, not so different. I'm 42.
Okay.
When we were younger, I don't know if your experience is like this, but one of my friends' parents were divorced. One. Now, I feel like it is more common for kids who are over the age of 10 to have parents who are divorced, at least divorced once, have their original parents not together. And that's a crazy thing. And I don't think we've really reached the zenith of seeing the results of these kind of broken families. I think we're going to be really starting to see it maybe now, maybe in the next 10 years.
Man, that's a scary thought.
It really is.
Because I really only had maybe 2 or 3 friends when I was a kid who were from divorced families, maybe something like that. And yeah, you're right. Like I imagine it's probably like the opposite now. Like there are probably fewer people who are still together. And that's really sad. That's an extremely sad thought.
It's a sad thought. And I mean, what is there when they get to the age that they're experiencing where we are? What is that going to look like? Because I think they're going to be even more reluctant to settle with someone. I think they're going to kind of push the single life, as far as it could go. So I don't know. I understand their reluctance too. I mean, if you do see that kind of, misery with your own parents, you're going to want to probably avoid it. I mean, wouldn't that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So it's not going to be good. I mean, like the only thing I could say about the current generation is that you and I didn't have the manosphere growing up. There are some people who grew up. I mean, I know my publisher is Matt Forney. He does Terror House.
Yeah.
He claims to have grown up with the manosphere. I think he's in his late 20s, as crazy as that sounds. And I think that he claims to have been reading manosphere stuff for 10 years. So, I mean, we're going to have people like that, especially now that it's a little more popular than it was 10 years ago. Yeah. So you're going to have young men who are, growing up with it. Is that good? Is that bad? Are you going to have guys who, again, are trying to maximize that bachelor lifestyle? Probably, especially if getting laid is harder than it used to be, which it probably is also. It's probably harder for these guys in their early 20s to get girlfriends in the first place. So of course they're going to want to. I have a line in one of the last chapters, or the last chapter of my book, where it's like I kind of tie the kill to party theme together, where I kind of look at it like myself. And you don't leave the party once you just get there. These guys are going to want to try to attain that ideal bachelor existence, and they're not going to want to give it up if they do get to it, or they're going to just keep going anyway until they're going to try to push that as hard as they can. So I think things are just going to get ugly. And I hate to say that. I don't want them to. But I just think, if I'm being honest, I think that's the way things are going to get. It's just going to get worse. These people who think that Zoomers are going to be the savior generation don't know any Zoomers.
Oh my Lord. Yes. I got some buddies who got their heads on straight in that generation, but man, the stories they tell me of their acquaintances, and I got a friend whose roommate is like 22, and oh man, I thought I was kind of lost when I was 22, but I think a lot of these young kids, they're a way different spot than I was. Geez, it is. Yeah. Like, I don't think Generation Z is going to be the saviors of, the West, or whatever you want to call this. I don't see that. And I think Generation Alpha, I guess, is what they're calling the next one.
Okay.
I don't think so either. I mean, I really am of the opinion that we are just on the slope down, and
Yes.
the vast majority of people are going to live in hell, for sure. They are going to have a tough time with it, but at the same time, we have free will, right? Like, we can make these decisions, and we can come to conclusions that, like, I came to the conclusion I wanted to get out of the red pill manosphere world. Like, I didn't want to keep living that way. Like,
Right.
I'd put a number of years into living like that, and I was just, I'm who I am because I did that. So I can't say any negatives, right? Like, I wouldn't be me if I hadn't have done lived that life and experienced it, because I'm way too, like, stubborn to take good wisdom advice from my elders. Like, I just, for whatever, I'm just not that person.
Right.
So I had to do it to learn that it wasn't something that I wanted, to keep doing. So I
True.
do think that young people, they can make these decisions, and they can always sort of aim themselves towards what's right, and a better better goals. So I don't think it's like going to be everybody, but I do think a vast majority of people are probably just going to keep heading downhill. Sadly.
Yeah. I mean, until will we live to see it? I mean, until social collapse. I don't think it necessarily is going to happen in our lifetime. Or, I mean, things are also accelerating at such a ridiculous rate.
Yes.
I mean, if you compare 2010 to 2020, you could probably, like, all of the social change from 1980 to 2010. Would that even be more significant? Probably not. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. This decade probably will be even crazier.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
said,
it's only 2022.
It's only 2022. Oh God. People have free will, but I think I mean, that's the kind of fallacy of the libertarian, that most people are capable of exercising it. Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a percentage who can. I think most people, it is true, are NPCs, so to speak.
Yes.
And they need good leadership. They're not bad people. They need good leadership.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think it's a fantasy, like this idea that we all can just be, like, sort of the creators of our own destiny. Like,
Right.
most people really, they can't do things like that. Most people, they don't have careers. They have jobs. Most people have jobs. Most people, they just make it month to month, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's no shame in being a normal person at all. But because that is the reality, people need benevolent leadership that is looking out for them and that can point them in the right direction. I think that you're right about that.
And unfortunately, I don't see it as something that is, I don't see where this would come from. Moldbug had an idea that a true right-wing regime change needs to be in complete totality. And if you have something that's even like 75%, kind of like 2016, the leftist backlash is so absolutely intense. So you either, for a right-wing regime to truly claim power, it needs to be clean and sweeping, 100%, or the kind of hell you get back, the blowback from the leftists is just 10 times worse. And I think we saw that after 2020 or during 2020.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's true. They're not going to, the regime doesn't want to lose its stranglehold on, all of the different levers of power.
Yeah.
And we're completely, by the way, I mean, I'm of the opinion that we're completely corrupt by some kind of left-leaning, I couldn't even tell you what it is anymore because it seems to contradict itself constantly. And there seems to be so many overlapping groups who seem to sometimes get together and agree and sometimes fight for control in other ways, so it's like it seems like the Wild West when it comes to the aristocracy, the elites, the controllers, whatever you want to use to identify these groups. They're not going to release power, and I think that they're hell-bent on driving us in whatever direction they want, regardless of what it means for our economy, individual people, the different countries that we're allied with or in conflict with. They're going to do whatever they want to do, but it's certainly not going to be in our best interest.
And as long as they kind of wave the things that people are taught to like in front of them, I mean, everyone seems to be happy about it. It's like leftists 20 years ago would talk about the evil corporations.
Yeah.
Now they love them.
Yes.
It's like a crazy thing. Like these these people have been led in a direction where they hate the middle class and love corporations, and they think that that's like right. It's just so crazy.
And they still think that they're the counterculture. They still think that they're the independent ones. Whereas they're just parroting all of the slogans and values of corporate overlords. Really, it's very silly. I saw a meme once that was like it was like a VW bus next to a more modern car, and the VW bus had like free love and all these other things, and then the more modern one had all the modern day left-leaning slogans, and it says like we're like, how did this happen? How did you go from being hippies to being corporate slaves?
It's funny how easy it was for I guess the elites to kind of push people in that direction. It didn't really take much.
Well,
but
that's our passions, right? They knew exactly what to entice us with to get our control. They gave us, they just teased our base instincts, and we went right along because we, can't help it.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome to hell. Here we are.
Welcome to hell. Well, Billy, I've had you for a little over an hour, and I told you I would respect your time. I promised. So, I guess at this point,
I'm having I admit I'm having a great time talking, but I just, the thing is, I do work, and I do get up very, very early for work. So like,
absolutely, man.
As lame as it sounds, I'd be probably sleeping right now, but I really appreciated, our chat. I thought it was great.
That's excellent, dude. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, and I want to thank you again for coming on. I'd love to wrap up with, what are you up to right now? What are your current projects? What's the future projects? And maybe some words of wisdom, perhaps, from my audience, from your perspective. What do you think what are you focusing on? What do you think is good for us as a whole, people who are awake enough to be listening to a conversation like this?
Okay. I think that we have the one great thing about the world in front of us is that we have a lot of tools to make an impact, even if it is kind of on a smaller scale, right? We're not going to maybe, I don't know, but most likely we're not going to change the world by ourselves. But what we can do is we have tools like Twitter, we have tools like phone, right, that I'm currently holding right now. You could make a YouTube channel, you could start a podcast, you could start to write. The alt lit scene is really in its infancy. Not infants. It just started. The alt lit scene is something that just started, and I think that 5 years from now, you're going to see people like Zero HP Lovecraft, like Delicious Tacos, kind of be borderline mainstream. I'm sure Zero HP Lovecraft wouldn't want that, but you're going to see these names really make an impact. I think we are just at the beginning. So it's not too late to start a podcast. It's not too late to start writing. Our scene recently had something called the Passage Prize, which was, I think there were like $10,000 of prizes, or maybe 20,000. There was some like outrageous prize bounty that there was like a art contest, a short story contest. There were all these contests. I mean, people are really, really making a concentrated effort to kind of get the art side of this sphere of, you know, if you want to call it right wing adjacent, however, whatever you want to say. My advice is to make art. And I mean, don't give up on family, don't give up on relationships. I mean, but I think that if we could get more people writing, more people making art, I think that that's always a good thing. I mean, it's just incredible that the reach you have to reach an audience just by yourself did not exist in 1990. I mean, we could talk all the shit we want about the modern world, but that's the one really incredible thing, that you yourself have the ability to make an impact.
I think that's good advice, man. Yeah, absolutely. You know, never have we had the access to get our work out to so many eyes and ears. I think it's, you know, we owe it to ourselves to make something, or just to create something and put it out there. You never know what's going to happen with it.
Yeah. I mean, give it a shot. I mean, it, you know, even if you have like a kind of passing interest in it, like just take time to do it, you know, take time to, it's not going to just happen. Just go for it. There's so many cool books that came out of our sphere. This one guy, let me see his actual name. He's Spinach Bra on Twitter, but Joshua Newton Jr. puts out a book called Draw Me a Gorilla, which is like the most creative book out of our sphere, because it's completely different from anything I've seen, where he has everyone he knows draw pictures of gorillas that he like psychoanalyzes. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm gonna write theory, you know, I'm gonna red pill people and write theory. Do something else, do something different, do something inspired by all the theory you read. Make art. Blessed, man. That's great. So people can find you at killtoparty.com, and do you have the same, is that your handle the same on Twitter? That is my handle on Twitter, at killtoparty. The book is called Welcome to Hell. It's available on amazon.com. You'll laugh. I don't know if you'll cry, but you'll definitely feel something. It's a book about modern dating. I throw in pop culture references. There's a lot of analysis, tons of video game references. I mean, I worked really, really hard on this book, and I guarantee that you will love it. So Welcome to Hell on Amazon. Check it out.
Yeah, I gotta echo that. I really enjoyed reading this book. Well,
thank
Billy,
you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for writing it, my man. And thank you again for coming on and giving me some of your time. And I think we had a great conversation.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thank you.
Right on. Glory to God for all things, Billy.
Glory to God.